Okay, good evening. I'll go ahead and call the school board meeting to order at 7 p.m. Mayor Doyle is absent tonight due to illness. Okay, would you please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, first item on the agenda is approval of the school board minutes dated October 13th and 27th, 2021. Is there a motion?
Chair LaFortune? I move we approve the school board meeting minutes dated October 13th and October 27th, 2021.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call vote. School board member Valesky?
Yes.
School board member Preble?
Yes.
School board member Richard?
Yes.
I vote yes. School board member Massey?
Yes.
School board member Truman?
Yes.
And school board member Johnson?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 7-0. Okay, that moves us on to the next item, which is adjustments to the agenda. I don't believe there are any this evening. Does anyone have any adjustments? Okay, moving on to correspondence. Is there any correspondence? None. Okay, that brings us to the public session. I have the list, and if anyone was unable to add their name to the list, I'll call after we go through these. So anyone wishing to speak this evening, please come to the podium. The first name on this list is Holly Trottier.
Good evening. I would like to bring forward, I recently found out about LD 816, which states that for a meeting between a school board and representatives of public employees that is requested by a representative of the employees, the meeting must occur at a regularly scheduled school board meeting, and public notice must be given at least 10 days prior to the meeting. And so I would like to request to speak at the November 23rd meeting and make a public request.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next name is Sue Newmeyer.
Members of the school board and interim superintendent Ray, my opening words come from Henry Ford. You can do anything if you have enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is the yeast that makes your hopes rise to the stars. Tonight, I am expressing collective concerns on behalf of many Saco taxpayers who have reached out to me. There needs to be a transparent process in place to search for a permanent superintendent. We are not talking about the past or individuals. We are concerned about the future for our children, our citizens, and our city. A process that includes soliciting the public for involvement is important for many reasons. Please include people who represent a variety of segments of the population. There are new residents with or without children who may be thinking of starting a family. Parents of current school children, retired people, staff members, and city officials should all be included. It's important that the group be formed without favoritism. People do care and will choose to join in if they feel the process will be fair and open. They will show their enthusiasm. These concerns have been brought to my attention by a wide cross-section of citizens. As elected or appointed school board members, you hire a leader to run the schools. That person or group works for you, and you work for the citizens of the city. The hours you put in at meetings do not go unnoticed. Thank you for that. Trust the process, and the public will instill their trust in you. Finally, some words of wisdom from Robert Fulghum, written in 1986. His words hold true today, as do the opening words of Henry Ford. He states, "All I really need to know about how to live and what to do and how to be, I learned in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of the graduate school mountain, but there in the sand pile at school. These are the things I learned. Play fair. Don't hit people. Put things back where you found them. Clean up your mess. Don't take things that aren't yours. Say you're sorry when you hurt someone. Share. Wash your hands before you eat. Remember to flush. Warm cookies and cold milk are good for you. Live a balanced life. Learn some and think some, and draw and paint and sing and dance and play and work every day some. Take a nap in the afternoon. When you go out into the world, watch out for traffic. Hold hands and stick together. Be aware of wonder. Remember the little seed in the paper cup. The roots go down and the plant goes up. And nobody really knows how or why, but we're all like that. Goldfish and hamsters and white mice, and even the little seed in the paper cup, they all die. So do we. And remember the Dick and Jane books and the first word you learned, the biggest word of all, look. Everything you need to know is in there somewhere. The golden rule, love, basic sanitation, ecology and politics, equality, and sane living. Take any one of those items and extrapolate it into sophisticated adult terms and apply it to your family, your work, your government, your world, and it holds true and clear and firm. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the school board this evening? Okay, seeing no one, I will close the public session and move on to superintendent's report.
All right, good evening. We have several items to talk about tonight in the superintendent's report. First one is that in the area, and actually in your agenda, things change so quickly in our world that we have 5 clinics in the area for COVID vaccinations for 5 through 11-year-olds, and we are totally maxed out on slots, have actually trying to add kiddos and families in to make sure that they have an opportunity. So we're at over 800 vaccinations that will be given through the 2 in Biddeford, 2 in clinics in Saco, and 1 in Dayton, and families had the ability to choose whatever date worked for them and their families. So, exciting news on that. Just want to thank Maine Health for partnering with us, and also thanking nurses and volunteers who are giving up some time to make sure those run smoothly. Tonight we were at Biddeford Middle School from 2:30 to 6:30, 8 o'clock. Friday night we are at Saco Parks and Recs, and then next Wednesday we're at Fairfield School, Thursday in Dayton, and Friday back in Biddeford. So we're going to try to squeeze everybody in as possible. Budget has started with the starting in the buildings, which will, after the Thanksgiving break, those budgets will go from teachers to principals into the formulation of a district budget that hopefully sometime early in the new year we'll begin to have that draft expenditure piece. Now, expenditures is one aspect of it. There's a two-sided coin here, with revenues being the other piece as well, because you can have all the expenses here, but obviously revenues dictate the tax rate. One of the things that I think we need to be a bit concerned about is valuation increase, and that's something that we'll talk and learn a lot more about. Last spring, we talked about valuation. What we know at this point in time is that the state average for valuation was a 5% increase. Where we want to be as a school department is not far, or as a municipality, is not far off from that 5% number, because anything you grow faster than the state, if your valuation is more, that is going to drop your state subsidy. And so you hope that anything outside of a 3% difference can get really big really quick. So got to be concerned about what valuation looks like. If you're thinking about home sales like from this summer and all of that news that you heard of 10, 16%, 20% more, that won't be in this year's number. That will be in the other year's number. The other piece that we have to advocate for at the DOE and state level is student enrollments, because there was shifts in student enrollments based off COVID. And last year at this time, when we were all talking with the DOE and advocating for finances and whatnot, I think everyone was saying, well, they take a 2-year average of enrollments, this will correct itself. But I'm not sure that it necessarily has throughout the states, because we're still living the same challenge with COVID. The other piece is another interesting challenge, is that with all kids in our system K through 8 that have the ability to have a free lunch every single day, that used to be done qualifying by a parent turning in a form or returning that form into the school. But now that that's free to everyone, the incentive of turning in that piece of paperwork to qualify you has seen a reduction in the number of kids that would qualify as economically disadvantaged. And so we're going to need to work with the DOE and look at what those trends are throughout the state to say, okay, if this happened here, is that a similar picture to what's happened in Saco and what's happened in Biddeford and what's happened in Sanford? And is there a way to adjust that on a state level? Because there will be communities that are winners and losers, and that is that free and reduced lunch rate is a huge factor on page 2 of the 279 of where, as you're kind of building that overall cost. So that's something that we have to really keep our eye on and really advocate to the Department of Education about that. I chair the Maine School Superintendents Association Finance Committee, and we liaise with the state once a month. And so those are some of the points that I'll be continually bringing up to say, hey, how does this work? How do communities in southern Maine and property valuation differ from what they may be in northern Maine or ones that have coastal waterfront? What is that difference that's there? Because as we would expect, whether this year or even probably more so next year, we'll start to see that rise. Right now they're working off a 2-year valuation average, and it may be something that we really lobby to push off to move back to the 3-year cycle for valuation. Recruitment and hiring. We're spending a lot of time trying to figure out how we can get substitutes, ed techs, bus drivers, teachers, and all of those into our buildings. We know that we have some referral incentives that are out there. We are looking at how we can guarantee days and working with our university partners of college kids or adults or any of the others to say, hey, if you're available Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we'll lock you in on those days. In the board packet tonight, you'll see a recommendation to raise substitute pay. This is something that has passed in the other 2 districts I serve in, and I think it's important that we stay competitive and pay those rates. While those rates will increase, there will be other challenges that will go along with that increase and how that impacts hourly employees and so on that we'll have to deal with in the future. But it's essential that that's one of the high stressors is not having substitutes each and every day. In addition, I've also reached out to York County Community College to engage in some conversations about how we can engage their students as a possible workforce for them, whether it's, matching up a class schedule for a half day or a long day, how we can work on building a curriculum with them that would line up people to have ed tech certification coming out of there while they're working for something else. We've got to get creative and continue to be creative with all of the, just we're competing against everybody else for employees, and we have to do more. Important for people at home and for the board to remember that the 90-day grace period for the required vaccinations that was passed by referendum a couple of years ago runs out on November 29th. So if you haven't got your plan into the school, November 29th is a day that law goes into effect, and if students are not vaccinated for the ones listed in the law, cannot attend school. Excited that at the middle school and working with Saco Parks and Rec, Ryan Sommer and his team, able to bring back Ski Club, and we're really trying to do as much as we can and drive that cost as low as we possibly can for students and for families, so it's going to be great to see that back out there. Also working with the middle school, and you'll see on your hiring tonight the appointment of an extra basketball team at the middle school. We had so many kids that were interested in participating in basketball that we felt like this was not the time to have a cut policy and that we needed to have kids involved in everything that we can get them in. There is a very minimal cost to running an extra team that won't have quite as number of competitions, but we felt that the benefit for that of making sure that kids had another outlet was important. As we look at building committee update, we met with the program committee last week, and we've kind of started to bring that down into this 4 to 6 option range. The next piece of those options will be handing what those options are over to Oak Point and working with Oak Point to come up with, here are the pros, here are the cons, here are the future costs of every single option, here's what needs to be done, kind of so that you can really lay that out graphically and say, okay, if we make this choice, then we will have this left to deal with. Or if we make this choice, this might be some of the things that go with that. On November 22nd, we will have a combined program, site selection, and building committee so that we can start getting everybody kind of aware of what some of those options may be. And then the site inventory committee needs to begin to look at, so if we went with, say, option 4, what does option 4 require for land situation? Because if we remember correctly from the presentation that we made a few weeks ago in the public, based off the number of kids that are in any given schools, there is a different acreage requirement if it's a 600-kid school, if it's a 1,000-kid school, if it's a 1,400-kid school. And so we want to start bringing that work together so that the site inventory committee can start looking at the suggested sites around town and saying, okay, this one might work for 2, 4, and 6, and this one will work for 1, 3, and 5, so that we have that information as we move forward to go on that. I think it is our hopes that we will be able to have a second public session sometime in December as our goal, to start putting out in the public, here are some of the possible options, here may be some of the possible sites, et cetera, et cetera. So we're moving ahead on that project, and I feel like we're making some good decisions along the way, and we're moving at a pace that we can get that out to the public, so that if you're sitting around during the holidays and you want to talk about the future of Saco schools, you'll begin to have some options to say, hey, I want to consider this, or we should consider this, or we should talk about this. So, questions?
Questions for the superintendent? Okay. Moving on to chair's report. So the only thing that I have this evening is that I have been in contact with Mayor Cassavant in Biddeford and Lisa Badnays, who's the chair in Biddeford as well, to see about our availability to meet. That's been challenging. Everyone has a very busy time of year right now, so that's yet to be scheduled. It's probably going to happen in the next couple of weeks, but with the holiday coming up very soon, I think we're all trying to be flexible about that. So in order to do that, we've done ad hoc committees for this type of stuff in the past, and so just to anticipate that we're going to, get sort of maybe potentially a last minute, can you meet next Tuesday or something like that? I'm going to go ahead and put together a committee to do that, and we're going to follow the similar structure that we had the last time, where it's chair, myself, vice chair, Beth Johnston, and I'm going to have Jen Preble sit in place of what we had for finance last time. And so I'll get the contact info out to you guys when I hear back from them in terms of the scheduling. That's really all that I have this evening. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Moving on to staff reports, there are none. There are no board subcommittee reports, no old business, and that brings us to the first item under new business, which is new hires. Is there a motion?
Chair LaFortune?
Yes.
I move we approve the nomination of Kelsey Nato, IEP Coordinator, Administrator, and issue a contract for the 21-22 school year.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call vote. School Board Member Pileski?
Yes.
School Board Member Preble?
Yes.
School Board Member Richard?
Yes.
I vote yes. School Board Member Massey?
Yes.
School Board Member Truman?
Yes.
School Board Member Johnston?
Yes.
A motion passes 7-0. Okay, next item is resignations. Sure, in your packet and no action needed. And that brings us to the NEWA presentation.
Okay, I'd like to welcome Meg Parkhurst to give a presentation about the recent NWEA data, which is part of the state assessment system for the students of Saco. So Meg.
Thank you very much. Give me a couple minutes here while I pull up the presentation on the screens for everyone. So tonight we're going to have an opportunity to take a look at the NWEA, which is Northwest Evaluation Association's measure of academic progress, which is often called NEWA or MAP testing for short, and looking at the fall administration in Saco schools. Give you a little bit of an overview of what the assessment is. There are 3 different assessments that we take: math, reading, and language use. In parentheses, you can see that there's varied grade levels for each of those assessments, with all students taking all 3 by 3rd grade, as required by the state. NWEA is now the state test. We will administer it in Saco 3 times during the year: fall, winter, and spring. It is an adaptive assessment, which means that as kids work through the multiple choice questions, they adapt to a student's ability to answer those questions. So it really gives us a good sense of not just is a 3rd grader performing at a 3rd grade level, but what skills does a 3rd grader have? Are they able to answer content that might be associated with 4th or 5th or 6th grade content? So it adapts upwards or downwards depending on how students answer specific questions. And in looking at the achievement scores, it's all based on norm reference data, which means that it's comparing students that are taking the assessment now to students who have taken that same bank of questions from 2015 to 2020 nationally. So you can really compare where students are in your district to national norms. And eventually, with this being the state test, we should also have an opportunity to look at statewide data and the comparison of Saco to that statewide data. Another important thing to consider is that the norms that are provided by NWEA are not the norms from this fall, so we really don't get to see how COVID has impacted those norms yet. So when we compare to those norm scores, we're looking at a regular third, fourth, fifth grader in a regular school year. So just kind of keep that in mind as we look at the data. Couple more things to think about. This is only one data point on one day. We have a lot of classroom assessments, both through the Eureka Math program and benchmark assessment system for reading. So we use this in conjunction with that information and looking at trends over time so that we really understand what's happening. In Saco, it's been used since the 2015-16 school year, though there's been different number of administrations at different grade levels and at certain points in time, different tests used depending on the building or the grade level that a student is in. And in January of last year is when Maine announced that it would be using NWEA as the main assessment that they were going to count towards accountability purposes. They do mandate that test in the fall and in the spring, but having that additional winter data point allows us to kind of get a midway point and see how kiddos are doing. So this first slide gives you a really high-level overview of all grade levels going across the bottom, with the blue showing math, that lighter green showing reading, and the grayish color showing language use. And then you can see that 50th percentile going right across the middle. So generally speaking, our average scores are hovering right around the 50th percentile with some dips in math that you might be able to notice in the 4th, 5th, 6th grade, and this is just in this particular administration. So now that I've kind of shown you where we were for this fall, we're going to step back a little bit and look at cohorts over time and how students have progressed through the grade levels, and then we'll take a look at historic scores in specific grade levels. So our current third grade students are shown in the top left corner there. They have only taken this assessment post-COVID, so we have 4 different administrations through last year and now, and you can see that they're pacing above average currently and have had a nice trajectory in their scores. In 4th grade and the following grades from here on out, you can kind of see that gap for the COVID test administration that we did not give in the spring of 2020. So we see there for both 4th and 5th grade, we were pacing well above national average, and post-COVID, we are just a hair below the national average, and these are showing our reading assessment scores here. We notice a similar pattern for our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in reading with above average performance pre-COVID, and then depending on the grade level, just a hair pacing or well pacing, that normed percentile post-COVID. And here we have 6th grade, 7th grade in the top right, and 8th grade in the bottom. So just to kind of give you an overall picture of historically compared to the national average for grades 2 through 8, so kind of averaging everybody and lumping them together, this shows how above 50th percentile we were from spring 2018, spring 2019. We had that gap post-COVID, and you can kind of see a summation of what we already saw prior, which is that there were some significant impacts as a result of COVID, it appears, but we are making progress towards recovering some of those. This is the first time we've given the language usage assessment, so we don't have a historical snapshot of where kids are, but you can kind of see the average score from our 3rd graders all the way up to our 8th graders, which shows a pretty clean trajectory on pace with the national norm. So just some of the things that we're noticing about this, those pre-COVID achievement scores were above national norms. That dip was noticed, less so in the upper grades, which is consistent with what the NWEA was seeing when they looked at some longitudinal studies during last school year, that the dip was lower for those students who already had some proficiency with reading and numeracy, that they were able to maintain some of those remote learning skills perhaps a little bit better than our younger students. We are currently in a recovering trajectory, but we're not yet to our pre-COVID levels. And for language use, with only that one test, we just see that we're trending slightly above national norms. So taking a look at math, we had our current first graders with their first administration. It's a little bit tricky to see the national norm there, but we are above the national average for our first graders. When we look at second grade, we can see their growth from last spring to this fall. This fall assessment was administered about 6 weeks into the school year, so kids did have a little bit of an opportunity to regain some of that summer loss. And we see a really nice trajectory there for our second grade students. We can see third grade on the top left, followed by fourth grade on the right-hand side and fifth grade at the bottom. And again, that gap in bars is that spring administration that we missed. We see similar to reading, but a little bit more dramatic in terms of performance below norms post-COVID, that we were well above those norm stages pre-COVID, and we see a recovering trajectory post-COVID. And really what we're looking for is kind of closing that gap between the student achievement and the norm, and then once we get to that norm, exceeding and outpacing that gap over time. And here we see our current sixth grade on the left, seventh grade in the top right, and eighth grade at the bottom. And again, we see them making continuous growth throughout the grade levels, and you can really see quite a historical picture here, given how many years they've taken this assessment. And our most recent picture in sixth grade is just slightly below national average. Seventh grade creeping up there, just hitting that national norm in the most recent administration, and eighth grade as well, just a hair over that national norm, so looking to increase that more over time for students. And again, here we kind of back up and take that bird's eye view of all grade levels and how they have averaged together, performed historically over time, where we see a pretty solid over average trajectory, a COVID break, and this is where you can really see that there was on average, when you're looking at bigger numbers, that impact to students, but that we're really heading in the right direction. Some of our takeaways in looking at this are that our pre-COVID achievement was above national norms, that we had a dip that was a little bit more significant than we noticed in reading. And again, that's consistent with national data. The national data showed some surprising things about reading, with students actually perhaps reading more during school closures or during remote learning periods when reading was required, so that actually didn't have as much of an impact, but that for math and numeracy, there was perhaps a greater impact. We also noticed that some of the, what we might label COVID losses are more significant in those middle grades, in grades 4 through 6, and that our gains are slated, if we keep up our pace, to move towards those pre-COVID scores, but we're not quite there yet. So where does this leave us? This is a really high-level overview. Our building leadership looks at grade-level data and teacher-level data. Our academic coaches are working to put together protocols to support teacher analysis of data. With the most important thing we can do with this data is help teachers to move individual student scores and really drill down to sub-goal areas to understand for specific students where are those weaknesses and what can we do to help close those gaps for students that might have shown historically different trends than what we're seeing in our data, or more drastic declines post-COVID. And again, looking at what supports we're offering, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom for students that might have a trajectory that maybe isn't looking as good as our average data. And lastly, during conferences and/or in the coming weeks, those reports will be sent home to parents so that parents can have that historical perspective for their own child of both this fall's administration as well as previous administrations for their own child. And we certainly encourage you to take a close look at that. We'll have an additional data point in January, and that will, little error there, January 2022. Hard to believe we're there already, but that will give us a sense of if we're continuing in the same trajectory and any other things that we might do to increase student performance. Included in the slideshow is a little bit more zoomed in versions of this if you want to take a look at it online, but I'm happy to take any questions at this point if there are any.
Thank you. Are there any questions? School Board Member Johnston?
Thank you for the report. I think I'm getting most of it. I am curious if I'm understanding you correctly that in January there will be another administration of this? Okay, so I think that's good because we're not just leaving things 6 months and going on to the next. So that's a good piece to understand. I'm also curious about the language arts, which were not, that testing was not done in the past. So I'm just curious, it's fairly encouraging, but I'm just curious as to why it is done now. Is that just a change in the way the test is supposed to be administered, or is there something else?
Yeah, that's a great question. NWEA actually offers a whole suite of assessments, including a reading fluency assessment. They have a science assessment as well. I think historically, Saco made the decision to do reading and math as kind of the core instructional pieces. The state of Maine is requiring the language usage portion as part of their state accountability model. So that's why we added it in this administration and why we only have one data point, because it wasn't used prior. And I think that's fairly consistent with other Maine schools that were using NWEA. Many of them were not utilizing language usage.
Okay, well, thank you. I think it's a good thing that we are now.
School Board Member Truman?
I noticed when I was reviewing this this weekend, there seems to be, like, the fall of last year, there's no data for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade on the math piece. Was there, I mean, I know you weren't here, so it's kind of a hard one to answer, but do you know why that was? Was it not required because of?
Yeah, my assumption is that there were different decisions made at building-based levels and/or district decisions made about different grade levels and who should take it. So there wasn't, in looking at past administrations, and really that could be set all the way back to 2015-16, some grade levels were testing 2 times a year, some grade levels were testing only once a year at the end of the year. So there was some variation at different grade levels and different schools about how frequently or which assessments they were going to use to test students.
So is that something that's more, now we're doing, everybody's doing the same thing?
Yeah,
3 times?
and part of that consistency is about the fact that it's the MEA at this point.
Right.
So students were taking a different assessment in addition to NWEA in the 2015-16 school year, for example.
Perfect. And then, and parents will be getting copies of these reports either
Yep.
at their conferences or, okay, because I think it used to be that we'd get like a summary of it at the end of the school year.
Yeah,
But kind of like getting it in the middle of the year is kind of a nice added bonus.
yeah, our current plan is to send those after each administration, and teachers have access to that information, so we encourage you to reach out if for some reason the dots didn't get connected.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So that brings us to item D, which is COVID case rate vaccination clinic update.
So I spoke about it a little bit, about our vaccine clinics in my superintendent's report, but in the memo is an overview of cases per week. As you can see, a couple of weeks ago, it seemed like in the entire area there was a little bit of a spike the week of the 29th, and I think we're headed for another spike this week as well. So we just need to remind ourselves that, well, our youngest, we do offer some protection of having masking in school and pool testing. It's important that we continue to practice good hand hygiene and social distancing in other places, because pool testing does not keep you away from a close contact outside of school. We want to do everything we can to make sure our kids are in school, especially as you look at the coming month, because November is such a chopped up month too. In December, you have a holiday that a kiddo, you have a close contact, you can miss a lot of school around a vacation time. And so just a reminder that everyone be careful, do what we can do, and that we do have the vaccination clinics that we are hoping we will see a positive result. That will obviously, kids, once they're fully vaccinated, will have that not having to quarantine factor as part of the piece. So just an update on that.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
I have a quick question. Can you just remind me, because I'm drawing a blank right now, with the pool testing, what is the turnaround time from the time that they take the swabs in the morning?
So our nurses typically have information the next day. This week there seemed to be a little bit delayed. I think we were moving not as quick this week, not on our end, but from the lab's point of view. So they were a little slower, which also tells me that they're experiencing a lot more testing going on. One of the interesting pieces that we've seen throughout the 3 school departments is that anytime we've had a positive pool, the Binex Now test has identified the positive cases, which has been very good.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. That brings us to item E, substitute pay rates.
Okay, in your packet here for tonight, obviously we know that substitutes is a difficult thing to come by, and we are recommending that we raise our regular substitute rate to $125 a day. Retired or a certified teacher who substitutes to $140 a day, and our nurse sub to $175 a day, in hopes to stay competitive, attract more. This is a rate that, if you pass tonight, all 3 of us in the area will be paying the same rate, so that we can be competitive and no one's competing against each other. And hopefully this will draw some more people in.
Just one clarifying question. What are the rates that we have right now in place?
We're at $100 a day. Geez, I've got to look. I've got so many going in my head. It's like $100 a day, $120 a day, or $130 a day for a retired teacher. And then the nurse sub rate is at like $140.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, is there a motion?
I just had one question. Those are the rates in Biddeford and Dayton. Do we know what the rates are outside?
Yeah, we looked around. So, Meg, it was 120 in RSU 21, 120 in RSU 21. Wells is still $100. Cape Elizabeth was a little bit more. They were at the 140 range. A little bit more in Portland. Westbrook's in the 100 range. Shelley did an average for us of a whole bunch of different places, and this puts us in a more of a competitive rate for the area. I'm not sure that we're not going to draw the same substitute from Cumberland, more than likely, as that's not a competing market for us, or Cape Elizabeth. I mean, it's a pretty good drive to Cape Elizabeth. We've pretty hyper focused here, and we need to rely on any of the relationships that we can have with the university and those students to hope that this is enough to draw them off campus to work in our schools.
Any other questions? School Board Member Johnston?
I was going to make a motion,
Oh, okay,
if there's no other questions.
go ahead.
I move we approve the increase in substitute pay rates as presented by the superintendent tonight.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
I think this is a smart idea if we're going to stay competitive, especially where, surrounding towns are close to that. I think it's a smart move, especially since it's so difficult to find somebody, so.
And I suspect that once we make our jump, others will make a jump too. And I don't think that this will be the solution to all of our substitute problems, but hopefully this will be help.
Okay, roll call vote. School Board Member Plesky?
Yes.
School Board Member Preble?
Yes.
School Board Member Richard?
Yes.
I vote yes. School Board Member Massey?
Yes.
School Board Member Truman?
Yes.
School Board Member Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Okay, that brings us to other information. Is there any other information this evening? And that brings us to item 14, which is executive session. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
I move we enter into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA subsection 405 6E, consultations between school board unit and attorney.
Second.
Seconded by School Board Member Truman. Okay, roll call vote. School Board Member Plesky?
Yes.
School Board Member Preble?
Yes.
School Board Member Richard?
Yes.
School Board Member LaFortune votes yes. School Board Member Massey?
Yes.
School Board Member Truman?
Yes.
And School Board Member Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. We are in executive session at 7:47.
Second.
Can we talk about that for an hour or so? No?
Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote. So School Board Member Pileski,
Yes.
School Board Member Preble,
Yes.
School Board Member Richard.
Yes.
I vote yes. School Board Member Massey,
Yes.
School Board Member Truman,
Yes.
School Board Member Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0, and we are out of executive session at 8:48. Motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Who was that?
Second.
Sarah first and Beth for second. Okay. School Board Member Pileski,
Yes.
School Board Member Preble,
Yes.
School Board Member Richard.
Yes.
I vote yes. School Board Member Massey,
Yes.
School Board Member Truman,
Yes.
School Board Member Johnston.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 7-0, and the meeting is adjourned at 8:49. Thank you, have a good evening.